The sea still clung to him when the plane landed, as if the ocean itself refused to let go of the version of him that had existed for the past week. A version unburdened, admired, intoxicated by youth and attention. He adjusted the cuffs of his expensive linen shirt and checked his reflection in the dark screen of his phone, satisfied with the faint tan that softened the sharpness of his usual corporate appearance. For 7 days he had lived inside a sunlit fantasy with a woman whose beauty drew stares in every lobby and restaurant they entered. She moved like she owned every room, and when she slipped her arm through his, he felt powerful, chosen, alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. He told himself it wasn't wrong. It was complicated, yes, but necessary. A man in his position deserved escape. He worked tirelessly, carried responsibilities no one else understood, endured the quiet emotional distance that had slowly grown inside his marriage. If his wife had become colder over the years, more distant, more absorbed in her own quiet world, then wasn't he entitled to find warmth somewhere else? That was the story he repeated each night as he lay beside the model in a luxury suite overlooking turquoise water, convincing himself that indulgence was not betrayal but balance. He had grown used to admiration, boardrooms full of nodding executives, interviews praising his leadership, but this was different. This was intimate validation. She laughed at his jokes before he even finished them. She studied him like he was fascinating. She posted filtered glimpses of their vacation, never revealing his face, but hinting at his presence. And he felt a reckless thrill knowing he existed in her glamorous orbit. He didn't think about consequences. He didn't think about home. Home was steady, predictable, waiting, and he believed it would always wait. The taxi ride from the airport felt unusually quiet. He scrolled through photos from the trip, pausing at one where she stood against the horizon, wind tangling her hair, her smile aimed only at him. He felt a flicker of pride, then quickly locked the phone as if the darkness outside the window could judge him. The city lights blurred past, familiar and grounding. He imagined stepping into his house, placing his suitcase by the stairs, and hearing his wife's soft footsteps from the kitchen. She would ask about the meetings. He would give careful, vague answers. They would fall into their practiced rhythm. He almost rehearsed his tone. Tired but successful, affectionate but not overly so. He assumed nothing had changed. Why would it? She was constant, reliable, safe. When the taxi stopped in front of the house, he felt a strange tension coil in his stomach, though he couldn't explain why. The lights were on upstairs. It was late. She usually slept early. He paid the driver and stood for a moment at the gate, listening to the silence of the neighborhood. The house looked the same from the outside, elegant, composed, dignified, just like his marriage appeared to everyone else. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, expecting the familiar scent of lavender candles she favored. Instead, something sharper lingered in the air, subtle, unfamiliar. He frowned, closing the door behind him quietly. The hallway felt slightly different, though he couldn't immediately place how. His eyes moved to the living room, and that's when he noticed the furniture had been rearranged. The armchair he always occupied had been moved near the window. The painting he disliked had disappeared, replaced by something abstract and bold. On the coffee table rested 2 wine glasses. One had a faint smudge of deep crimson lipstick, darker than anything his wife wore. His pulse stumbled. He told himself it meant nothing. Maybe a friend had visited. Maybe she had changed her style. He called her name, forcing casual warmth into his voice, but the sound echoed strangely in the quiet house. No immediate answer came. Instead, he heard a soft sound upstairs. A footstep, calm, unhurried. His heartbeat began to thud louder in his ears as he climbed the staircase. Each step felt heavier, as though the air itself resisted him. He reached the bedroom door and noticed it was slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway in a thin golden line. He pushed it open slowly, bracing himself without knowing why. She stood by the window, back turned, city lights reflecting faintly in the glass. Her silhouette looked the same and yet entirely different. Stronger somehow, more self-assured. She wore a dress he had never seen before, fitted elegantly, her hair styled with more intention than usual. For a brief second, he felt disoriented, as though he had walked into the wrong house. She turned when she sensed him, her expression unreadable. Not surprised, not guilty, simply aware. His eyes instinctively scanned the room. On the nightstand lay a man's watch, sleek, masculine, undeniably not his. The sight struck him like cold water. His mind scrambled for explanations, but none came quickly enough. The version of himself from the beach, the confident man with secrets and excuses, suddenly felt fragile. He opened his mouth to greet her, but the words tangled in his throat. In that suspended moment, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't just suspicion, it was recognition, a realization that the ground beneath their marriage had shifted while he was away chasing sunlight and admiration. He felt the first crack in his certainty, the first tremor of fear that perhaps the stability he had taken for granted was never as immovable as he believed. Standing there, suitcase still in his hand, he sensed that whatever waited in this room would not be easily explained away with charm or confidence. And for the first time since boarding that plane a week ago, he felt completely unprepared. For several long seconds neither of them spoke, the silence stretching tight between their bodies like a wire pulled to breaking point, and he became painfully aware of every small detail in the room. The faint hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of a car passing outside, the soft rustle of fabric as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. He set his suitcase down slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile composure remained. "You're awake," he managed to say, hating how ordinary the words sounded in a moment that felt anything but ordinary. She looked at him steadily, her gaze neither warm nor hostile, simply clear. "I could say the same," she replied, her voice calm, almost detached. He swallowed, trying to regain control of the narrative the way he always did in business meetings. But this was not a boardroom, and she was not an employee waiting for direction. His eyes drifted again to the watch on the nightstand. It gleamed under the bedside lamp, unapologetic in its presence. "Whose is that?" he asked, forcing a casual tone that convinced neither of them. She followed his gaze and then looked back at him without hesitation. "Does it matter?" The question hit harder than a confession. He felt heat rise in his chest. "Of course it matters. This is our home." She tilted her head slightly. "Was it?" The words were soft, but they sliced through him. He took a step closer. "Don't do this. If someone was here, I deserve to know." She let out a slow breath, as though she had rehearsed this moment in her mind many times. "You deserve honesty?" she asked quietly. "Interesting." His stomach tightened. "What is that supposed to mean?" She walked past him toward the dresser and picked up a small device. His second phone, the one he had carelessly left hidden in a drawer before leaving for his so-called business trip. She held it between her fingers, not accusingly, just matter of fact. "This started buzzing the day after you left," she said. "I thought it was work. It wasn't." His pulse pounded in his ears. "You went through my things?" He shot back instinctively, grasping at outrage to mask his fear. "It was ringing," she replied evenly. "Over and over." I answered. The air seemed to thin around him. He imagined the messages lighting up the screen, the photos, the intimate words he had typed in hotel rooms while believing himself untouchable. "It wasn't what it looks like," he began, the oldest and weakest defense rising automatically to his lips. She almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. "It looked exactly like what it was." Her composure unsettled him more than tears would have. He had prepared himself, vaguely, for anger if she ever found out. He had not prepared for calm clarity. "It was a mistake," he insisted. "A stupid distraction. It didn't mean anything." She studied him carefully, as though assessing a stranger. "That's the problem," she said. "It meant nothing to you." He opened his mouth to argue, but she continued, her voice steady. "You don't even realize how long you've been gone. Not physically, emotionally." He felt the accusation settle heavily in his chest. "I've been working for us," he protested, For this life. She gestured subtly around the room. This life? She echoed. You mean the one where we eat dinner in silence? Where you answer emails while I'm speaking? Where anniversaries become calendar reminders? Each sentence chipped away at the confidence he had built over years. You're exaggerating, he muttered, though even he could hear the uncertainty creeping into his tone. She shook her head gently. No, I'm finally being honest. The word finally lingered in the air. So what? He snapped, frustration overtaking defensiveness. You decided to get even? Her eyes flashed, not with guilt, but with hurt long buried. This isn't about revenge. She walked to the window again, crossing her arms loosely. When I found those messages, I felt something break, but not the way you think. It wasn't shock. It was confirmation. He frowned. Confirmation of what? She turned to face him fully now. That I had already lost you. The statement stole the air from his lungs. You never fought for us, she continued. You assumed I would always be here, waiting, adjusting, understanding. He tried to interrupt, but she pressed on. When was the last time you asked me how I was? And actually listened? He searched his memory and found only vague fragments. That's not fair, he said weakly. I've provided for you, for everything. She nodded slowly. Yes, you provided money, comfort, a beautiful house, but you stopped providing yourself. The truth in her words unsettled him deeply because he recognized pieces of it. He had been distant, distracted, convinced that stability required no maintenance. So there was someone, he said finally, his voice quieter now. The question was no longer accusatory but fearful. She didn't look away. Yes, the single word echoed in the room. He felt something inside him twist painfully. How long? He asked. She hesitated, not out of shame but out of consideration. Long enough to remember what it feels like to be seen. Jealousy flared, sharp and immediate. Did you sleep with him? The bluntness surprised even him, but he needed to know. She held his gaze. Yes. The answer landed like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, gripping the back of the chair for support. Images he didn't want flooded his mind. In this house? He demanded hoarsely. She didn't answer right away, and that silence was answer enough. His chest burned with a mixture of rage and humiliation. How could you? He whispered. She looked at him with a sadness that seemed older than this moment. I could ask you the same. The symmetry of their betrayal hung heavy between them. But there was a difference he could feel even if he didn't want to admit it. His affair had been fueled by ego and thrill. Hers had grown from absence and neglect. Do you love him? He asked, the question tasting bitter. She considered carefully. I love who I am when I'm with him, she said. I'm not invisible. The words pierced deeper than any confession of passion. He realized then that this wasn't a dramatic scandal born overnight. It was the slow consequence of years of emotional erosion. What do you want? He asked finally, his voice stripped of authority. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. I want truth, and I want to know whether there's anything left here worth saving. Her words did not echo loudly, yet they filled every corner of the room, pressing against him until he felt smaller than he ever had in his own house. He stood there, staring at the woman he had once believed he understood completely, and realized he was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. She was not trembling. She was not begging. She was not accusing him with dramatic fury. She was simply standing in her truth, and somehow that composure unsettled him more than anger ever could. He dragged a hand through his hair and began pacing slowly across the room, trying to gather fragments of pride that no longer seemed to fit. You're talking like this is all my fault? He muttered, though the force had drained from his voice. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she sat down on the edge of the bed, her posture upright, her eyes following him with quiet attentiveness. It's not about fault, she said at last. It's about responsibility. The word struck him harder than blame would have. Responsibility meant ownership. It meant he could not hide behind excuses or distractions. He stopped pacing and faced her fully. "I made a mistake," he admitted, the sentence feeling foreign on his tongue. "I was selfish. I won't deny that. But we can fix this. We can forget the others. We can start over." Even as he spoke, he sensed how fragile those promises sounded. She searched his face carefully, as if measuring whether the man before her was capable of understanding what he had broken. "Starting over doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen," she replied gently. "It means changing what allowed it to happen." He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of that truth settle deep in his chest. For years he had prioritized expansion, ambition, growth in every area of his business life. Yet in his marriage, he had assumed permanence required no effort. He had treated love like a fixed asset rather than something living that needed care. "I didn't realize how far we drifted," he confessed quietly. "I thought we were just comfortable." She gave a faint, almost sad smile. "Comfort without connection becomes loneliness." The simplicity of her statement stripped away his defenses. He moved closer, lowering himself into the chair across from her so they were finally at eye level, no longer separated by pride or physical distance. "When you say you felt invisible," he began slowly, "I need you to explain it to me. I need to understand." It was the first time that night he had asked without accusation or interruption. She hesitated, then spoke with measured honesty. She described evenings when he would come home physically present but emotionally elsewhere, eyes fixed on a screen, responses reduced to distracted nods. She described celebrating small achievements alone because he was too tired to engage. She described lying beside him at night feeling as though she were next to a stranger who shared her bed but not her thoughts. Each detail felt like a mirror held up to his neglect. He remembered those moments now from his perspective, believing he was exhausted, justified, too burdened by responsibility to offer more. He had never considered how consistent absence could erode love. "And he filled that silence," he said quietly. She nodded. He noticed it. There was no romantic exaggeration in her tone, only factual acknowledgement. That hurt even more. "I hate picturing you with him," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "It makes me feel sick." She looked at him steadily. "That's how I felt reading your messages." The symmetry returned again, undeniable and humbling. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as shame washed over him. The glamorous memories of the beach now felt shallow, almost embarrassing. What had seemed thrilling days ago now looked like an escape from responsibilities he hadn't wanted to confront. "I don't want to lose you," he said again, more quietly this time, stripped of entitlement. "But I also don't want to trap you if you've already moved on." The admission surprised even him. It was the first unselfish thing he had said all night. She inhaled deeply, considering her words with care. "I haven't decided to leave," she answered, "but I won't stay in the version of this marriage we had." He lifted his gaze to meet hers. There was firmness there, but also something softer, perhaps the faintest trace of hope. "Then tell me what needs to change," he urged. She stood and walked toward him, not intimately, but deliberately, stopping close enough that he could see the subtle tremble she had hidden so well. "You need to choose this," she said. "Not because you're afraid of being alone, not because you're jealous, but because you value us more than your ego." The words landed with clarity. He realized how much of his affair had been driven by ego, the need to feel admired, youthful, powerful. He had mistaken attention for affirmation. "And you?" he asked gently. "Can you let him go?" She held his gaze for a long moment. "If I see real change," she said. "If I feel seen here again." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a rejection either. Outside, the first hint of dawn began to lighten the edges of the sky, soft gray replacing deep night. The darkness that had wrapped around their confrontation was slowly giving way to something uncertain but possible. He rose from the chair, not to touch her impulsively, but to stand beside her. For a moment they simply faced each other, two flawed people stripped of illusions. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight," he said, "but I'm willing to do the work. Counseling, Honesty, whatever it takes. She studied him carefully, as though searching for sincerity beneath the wreckage of pride. Then it starts now, she replied. No more secrets, no more parallel lives. He nodded slowly, feeling both terrified and strangely relieved. The fantasy he had returned from was gone, replaced by something far more demanding and far more real. He understood that rebuilding would be painful, that trust would not reappear simply because he desired it. But for the first time in years, he felt present, fully aware of the fragile human being standing in front of him. As the light outside grew stronger, illuminating the room in pale gold, he realized that the greatest shock of the night was not discovering her betrayal. It was confronting his own emptiness and recognizing that love, neglected long enough, will seek oxygen elsewhere. Whether they would survive this fracture remained uncertain, but in that quiet moment between night and morning, they both understood that the future of their marriage would no longer be decided by assumption. It would be decided by choice.